Okay, good morning. Let's get cracking here. My name is Charlie Macleod. This is my friend and colleague, Steve Van Esch. Let me see if I can just turn this down a little bit. Volume. Super high. All right, so for the next 60 minutes, we're going to be talking about UI design, styling, accessibility, and some DPI issues. It's a pretty busy agenda, so pretty ambitious agenda. Hopefully we'll get through all of it. So, without further ado, DPI. So first, a little background, what is DPI? You can think of DPI as a measure of the monitor resolution. And in current day systems, it's very common for DPI to change from system to system, and in many cases, even from monitor to monitor, if you have some kind of multiple monitors set up. The way that Windows deals with all these different DPIs is through something called scaling. The way to think about scaling is if you have the same piece of content that you want to show on a 96 DPI or a 192 DPI, the content is going to be drawn with twice the number of physical pixels on the 192 DPI. It may look bigger, it may actually look smaller. That's really more a function of the physical monitor dimension, but it will have twice the clarity. And so you can think of increasing resolution and increasing scaling as a measure of the clarity of the content. And really, you know, what do we need to know about DPI as pro add-in UI developers? Okay, so first the good news, Pro uses WPF. We're inside Pro, and WPF is dpi-aware. So for the most part, if we just stay out of the way and don't do anything and let WPF do its thing, it's going to handle most of the scaling and so forth for us automatically. There are a couple of considerations that we need to be aware of when we develop our add-ins. The first is doing good layouts, and the second is some bitmap considerations. There's a lot of documentation available online relevant to DPI and display scaling. I've provided a reference to one of the resources that I used quite heavily putting this material together. It's from the Microsoft build. If you're interested in this topic, I encourage you to look at that further. So layout, one thing Microsoft talks about is adaptive layouts. And there's a particular set of container controls that we can use, grid. Yeah, can you turn the, I got a high volume here. Can you just back it off a little bit, please? Is that possible? I can tell it's reverbing. So the containers like grid, dock panel, stack panel, wrap panel, and so forth. Really, you want to avoid fixed positions. You want to avoid hard coding, except, say, for things like margins and paddings, perhaps images if you don't want them distorted. Consider, horizontal and vertical alignments of stretch to occupy the available space. If you do have some required minimum dimension, if all else fails, you consider wrapping your content in a scroll viewer. That way, if it gets clipped, you'll get horizontal and vertical scroll bars to allow them to navigate to the clipped content. Bitmaps. So when you're designing your bitmap assets, you may want to consider actually making them at a larger size than they're actually going to be shown. Microsoft documentation says that they do a better job of downscaling than upscaling content. What that means is if, let's say you have a 32 by 32 bitmap and you want to show it at an effective resolution of 32 by 32, if you design that to physically be 64 by 64 pixels, when it's shown on the 192 DPI screen, it's actually going to be shown with absolutely no scaling. it'll be shown with perfect clarity. It'll be shown as good as the bitmap was that you made. When it's shown at 96 dpi, it's going to be shrunk. It's going to be shrunk by half. Microsoft say they do a better job of that, shrinking, than the converse, which is where they actually blow it up. So if you made it at 32 by 32, it gets doubled in size for the 192 dpi, and that's where you kind of get things looking blocky and blurry and chopped. The other thing that you can do is you can use vector XAML, okay, and Steve will show you an example of that. Vector XAML you can think of as being a true type font, so it scales perfectly across all of the DPIs. And in this particular snippet, I'm showing an example of what that looks like. There's some tools available. This particular one is free. You can download it. You design your bitmaps, and then you can copy and paste this XAML format into your user controls. Let's move on and talk about styling then. New at 1.4, we have two new themes, dark theme and high contrast. And in order for your add-ins to blend, when the theme is toggled, they've got to be styled correctly. It's not actually required, of course, that your add-ins blend in at all. If you want to have them styled completely differently, that's perfectly okay. But if you do want them to have them switch as we switch themes from light to dark and so forth, then the following slides will be of interest to you. So some general rules of thumb, and then I'll show you an example. Text blocks and buttons, they're probably the most important things to style correctly. With text blocks, there are a number of different styles as to whether you have heading, subheader, sub-subheader, a label of a label, or some other descriptive text. Buttons, whether it's a forward button, back button, home button, regular button, there are also styles for that too. And then there are a few other additional styles for these other controls. It's impossible for us to cover all of the styles and their usage in this 1 hour session. I encourage you to look at the Pro Style Guide that we have available online. You can see it listed there in the URL. We have all the styles there. We have all the controls they apply to, which ones have default styles, and so on and so forth. Also important, try and avoid setting background and foreground colors. The best thing is to not set any color at all, or set the background color to transparent. If you don't set any color on your container controls, they inherit the color of their parent, and if they don't have any color, they inherit the color of their parent, and eventually they get to the correct background color. If you do have to set a color, avoid using system colors. System colors won't flip. If you think of the light theme and dark theme as being negatives of each other, the white becomes black and the black becomes white. That's what happens when we flip between the themes. If you've set something to be colors.white, it's going to be colors.white across all the themes. So use the Esri brushes, the Esri colors. Again, those are available online. I show the resource links on this particular slide. We'll show an example of this too. So you got your add-in, and it looks good in the light theme, it flips to dark, got all these problems. So first thing to do is make a copy. Then in the working copy, for those styles, for those controls that look problematic, probably the easiest thing to do is just delete off all the styling. Just take off all the styling and then look at it again. In many cases, just removing the style will probably fix the problem. Most of our controls actually inherit a basic default style from Pro, so if you don't specify a style, the correct one will automatically be assigned, okay? And again, the list of controls that have default styles is available on the Pro Style Guide online, okay? Those ones that still don't look right, you're gonna have to get in there and fix them yourselves, okay? And you pretty much just wanna slowly, iteratively add in styling until you get it just right, okay? So easiest thing is to do, take out the styles and then just style those things that still, don't look quite right. Here is the resources once again. And the other point of reference I just want to make is that all the pro samples at 1.4, we've styled all of them so that they work across all three styles. So they're all kind of like a practical set of examples. And actually a lot of the lessons learned that we got going through that exercise have kind of been distilled into this presentation this morning. All right, so let's just take a look at a few things then. So I'm going to go to Pro. All right, we're going to be working with this dock pane here. Oh, sorry. Not sure what happened there. Yeah, I see it. Not quite sure where I lost it. Okay, so we're going to be working a lot with this dock pane here. As you can see, I'm in the light mode, and for the most part, it looks pretty good. It matches, the colors match. The text is, looks relatively decent. It could use a little polish, but for the most part, it blends in reasonably well. I don't have any issues with the color or any of this bordering or highlights. It all looks reasonably good. Okay, let's switch to dark. And then we'll take a look at the same content in dark. And let's see what we get now. All right, so I'm in the dark theme. Go to styling. Yeah, it looks quite different. Okay, looks like hell. So really we got some issues going on there that didn't show up in the light theme, okay? That's probably what may happen to a lot of you if you have existing add-ins. All right, so let's see how we can actually fix these issues, okay? All right, so let's go into Visual Studio. And let's go to the XAML. All right, so the first thing, I'll try not to scroll too much, but the screen resolution is quite small for these slide projectors. So the first problem I got is I got a background color on my grid container that matches the background color of the light theme in Pro, so I'm just going to delete that, okay? I don't need that. Now I got this highlight on my border. What I really need to use is one of the Esri brushes that come with Pro. Now, I just happen to remember that it's Esri Gray 155 because I practiced this demo X number of times. You're not going to remember that, right? So realistically, you probably have the Pro Style Guide open next to Visual Studio as you're kind of working through these things. It's impossible for me to show the two side by side on this particular monitor, but you get the idea. And then I've got that little highlight line here, similar deal. I need to replace that with an Esri color. Let's just see how that looks. Okay, let's run it. All right, so that fixed a lot of the problems, okay? Just simply getting rid of the background color and switching to the Esri brushes. Notice now how my border, it was black or dark gray in the light, now it's white or almost white in the dark, right? That negative. Okay, let's go and give it a little polish. The buttons, they need a little work, and then some of the text here, okay? And just as kind of a hint to me, I've actually put the name of the text style that this particular text should have as kind of like a prompt. So you can see what the styling should be. Okay, so let's go ahead and take care of that. Okay, this guy first. So again, you just use this style attribute. Labels, they actually inherit a default style. I don't have to do anything. I just leave them alone, no style, okay? This particular text, it gets regular style. Again, which style do you use for which piece of text? It's in the style guide. It explains, you know, which ones are the headers and so on and so forth, which ones are the regular text. And then we got this smaller sort of sub-content header right here. I'm going to change that. And that's going to be this style H4 text block. Okay, so I'm just setting my styles. Okay. The expander, we got a style for the expander. There's about 2 or 3 different styles. I'm going to use this one, which is an expander with no border. Expanders are pretty common on your UIs. If, say, you've got some radio controls or checkboxes that you're grouping together, you notice that the Pro dock panes will use them quite heavily. Radio buttons, I don't have to do anything with those. They get a default style. And then last, the buttons. Okay, so on the buttons, in this particular case, I want a style called simple button, I believe. Okay, let's set that. And it comes with a margin and padding built in, so I can get rid of this hard-coded setting. Okay, and let's see how that looks. Okay, so notice now my text, slightly larger, got a slight gray tint to it. Again, slightly smaller than the H3. A little bit of difference between the regular text and the default style. Anyway, these are just the little things to actually make your dock panes blend. And then the buttons. The buttons now have that Esri simple button styling with that nice little mouse over and that built-in margin. And there's the expander, okay? All right, let's go back to the slides. Okay, let's talk then about accessibility. And we're going to break it into 2 sections, the stuff that we'll do in XAML and WPF, and the stuff that we can do in the DAML, the config.daml. Focusing on these aspects. Of course, accessibility is driven, in the most part, by the Section 508 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act that we kind of colloquially call 508. There's other considerations too, like the Web Consortium access guidelines. They kind of bleed over into desktop. One of the most important things is that anything that you can do with a mouse, you should also be able to do with a keyboard, okay? And when you're doing keyboard-only access or navigation, it's really important that the tabbing works correctly. Now, for the most part, you want your tab order to flow from left to right and top to bottom. I put the asterisk there because if you're doing something for international, it may well be the reverse, okay? But in the most cases, it's left to right, top to bottom. You want to assign tab stops to all the interactive controls. So anything that the user can interact with has to have a tab stop. Moreover, if you have read-only text boxes and you want them to be able to copy and paste content out of those, there should be tab stops also. Group-related controls that behave as a single control together. Okay, the canonical example is radio buttons, and they should act as a single tab stop. And most important, and this is a requirement, you have to show focus. You have to provide visual feedback for where you are as you tab, okay? That's required. Another point of reference is that if you get the tab order correct, screen readers key off the correct tab order. So if someone is using a screen reader, if your tab order is set correctly, the screen reader will use that as a prompt for how it should relay information to the user who is using your form. It knows in what order it should actually scan that form. Okay, in most cases, the way we lay out the form in the XAML is actually going to be the way that we want the tab order to be. So in many cases, we won't have to set it. If we just let WPF do its thing, we'll actually probably get the correct tab order without setting anything. However, there will be situations where the tabbing out of the box is not correct. And in those cases, you've got to get in there and you've got to fix it. To fix it, you're going to use something called keyboard navigation, and these attached properties, tab index is tab stop and tab navigation. There are others, but these are the main three. Tab index is pretty straightforward. It's a zero-based index. You set it 0, 1, through the number of interactive controls that you want to be tabbed, okay? You explicitly set the tab order. If you want some control that would otherwise be a tab stop to not be a tab stop, you can use this is tab stop, and you can set it to false or true. In this case, I've got a read-only text box that I want to be tabbed, so I say is tab stop equal true. Last but not least is this thing called tab navigation, and it controls the tabbing behavior of child controls when you have a container. And I'll show you an example of how to use that shortly. But these are the main three. WPF buttons. And I say WPF buttons because I want to differentiate those from the buttons on the ribbon that we do in DAML. If we have a button on a form that performs some kind of submit action, then we have to provide a default key behavior, and that is, by convention, enter. So when you hit the enter, that default action should execute. So if you're committing to a database or saving to a file or so on and so forth. The converse is, if you have some button that performs some kind of cancel or reset, then that, by convention, must execute on the escape key. We have two properties we can set on the buttons, is default and is cancel, to actually, wire in that behavior. Alt text. So in alt text, when you hit the alt key, these little underscores show on the content on the buttons. To do alt text in WPF, you just use an underscore in the content next to the letter that you want to be that alt. So in this case, I've put an underscore next to the letter A. I hit the alt key, it will show the underscore. I hit the A, it will execute that button. Old school Windows, we used to use an ampersand. It's also required that you have shortcut keys for all your buttons. To do that in WPF, we use something called a key binding. And I show an example of that key binding here. Here I'm binding the escape key to the same action, the cancel action, that is associated with the cancel button. And I'll show an example of that. Last, tooltips. So assistive technology uses tooltips. Tooltips also, of course, provide a prompt when you mouse over. You have to provide tooltips to all your interactive controls. Screen readers are also smart enough that if you pair content, like in this case, I'm showing a label paired with a text box, especially the tab order set correctly, they're smart enough to figure out that this label actually applies to this interactive control. This is just kind of an FYI. There's a little utility in Pro, it's called a pane switcher. I kind of love that name, pane switcher. You invoke it with the control and the tab key. And the way it works is if you want to just use the arrow keys to go between panes, you hit the control key and then you press tab and you keep holding the control key down. And then you can use the arrow keys to navigate through the different panes. I'll show you an example of that. I use it actually quite a lot in the demo. Let's see, let's go back. I think what happens is when I hit my escape key to break out of PowerPoint, it actually flips my monitor. No, not that time, that's good. Okay, let's go to Pro. So the first thing I said was, and here I'm going to use that pane switcher, Control, Tab, up it comes, keys only. I go down to my dock pane. Okay, now my focus is in my dock pane. So let's just see how the tab order is out of the box. Okay, no tab index set. So go tab, that's good. Okay, I probably went into that read-only field. I got no feedback, that's a problem. Yeah, I'm in that field. Okay, we're gonna have to fix that. Tab, I'm on the combo box. Okay, that's cool. I'm happy with that. The expander, yeah, that's good. So I'm liking that. I'm not sure where I am now. I'm probably in that big read-only text box. That's a problem. And now I'm on the apply, I'm on the cancel, and then I'm back. So it's close, but it's not 100%. So we're gonna have to get in there and fix a few things. Let's try the default actions. So enter key, no, dead. Let's try escape key, no, nothing, okay? So we're gonna have to fix that too, my actions, okay? I'm just gonna switch back to light theme. It's a little easier to see the feedback on the controls. And we'll go ahead and fix those issues. Okay. So, let's go back into Visual Studio. All right, so you guys don't have to sit through me fumbling, typing in a bunch of tab indexes. I've already typed them in. Ditto for tooltips. I've also provided tooltips for my interactive controls. So here I've set the tab index. I've explicitly set it. It's a 0 based on the controls that I want to be tabbed. 0, 1, 2, I'm skipping this guy, 3, 4, and then down to the buttons, 5 and 6. I've also set my isDefault equals true and my isCancel equals true on my buttons. So I should get that default behavior. I hit enter, I should get the apply button executing. I hit escape, I should get my cancel command executing, okay? And this particular read-only text box, I've set isTabStop false, so I want to skip this guy. Okay, let's build it. And let's run it. So this is like our first iteration. Maybe this is good enough. Maybe we're done. Okay, back to styling. Okay, here's our dock pane. Okay, so I'm not using the mouse. I got to get focus into that particular dock pane. So control, I tap the tab. The pane switcher comes up. Dock pane 1. Okay, it's got my focus. Tab. Okay, that's still a problem. We haven't fixed that, okay? Still don't have feedback, visual feedback. That's a requirement. Okay, combo, that's cool. Oh, that's funny. It skipped. It skipped the expander. I set that to be tab index 4 or 3, whatever it was. I explicitly set that tab to be after the combo, and it skipped it. It went down to the apply. Cancel. Now it's to the expander. That's not right. That's not what I want. I want left to right, top to bottom. So we still got a problem. We got to fix that. Okay. Let's see the enter key. Okay, cool. My escape key. No, that's a little funky. That was a double tap. You see that? I mean, now that map pane has focus. You see that? Now I hit the escape. That's a little problem. That's a little weird. So we kind of got to fix that too, okay? So we're close, or I should say we're closer. Okay, it's still not right. Okay. So let's go ahead and fix these things. We got the visual feedback on the read-only text box. We got an issue with the expander. We got an issue with the escape key. Okay, let's fix it. All right. Let's see. First things first, let's fix the cancel, this guy, okay? What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to use a key binding, okay? Let's set a key binding for the escape key that the user control will get and will execute that default action. Really, these default actions are kind of like designed for modal dialogues as such. And so when we've got these modeless dock panes, we can get into issues with how the keys react. I mean, applications that have a lot of modeless dialogues, they don't really know what should get the escape key, right? So we just got to give it a hand. Okay, so I'm going to set a key binding. So now on my user control, when I hit the escape key, the user control will get that escape key and it will execute the cancel command, okay? So that's how we're going to fix that. Let's fix the expander. So WPF can get a little weird with how it does tabbing with containers that have child controls, which is why I added the expander in. And so what you have to do is you have to tell it that you want the tab navigation on the container control to be local to it. So I'm going to use my keyboard navigation dot tab navigation equal to local. That tells WPF to tab onto this control, and then, you'll be working with the radio buttons within it. So that will fix our ordering. It's just good practice to set that same attribute on your parent control. That tells WPF that when you tab onto the dock pane, successive tabs will go to its children instead of tabbing off to the next dock pane. Somehow it's got to know that when you tab onto it, that you want to stay onto it and not tab immediately off it, okay? All right, last but not least, that read-only text box, this guy here. We could come up with some kind of styling, I guess. That would be a lot of work to show a border around it when it gets focus. But the easiest thing, especially because I want my user to be able to copy and paste the text out of it, is to actually automatically highlight the text when they tab into it. There's no way to do that in XAML. So we just got to use pretty much old school Windows. So when I get focus, I'm going to set an event, and in this event, I am going to highlight all the text. This is not MVVM, but unfortunately, it's not a perfect world, and neither is WPF. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to cast the sender of this event, which I know to be my text box, to a text box, and then I'm just going to select all of the text, okay? I'm just going to build that. Let's run it. Let's see what we get now. Back to my styling project. Okay. So control, tab, arrow, 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 dock pane. Okay, focus. Here we go. Tab. Okay, that's more like it. Visual feedback. That's compliant. Combo. Yes, that works. Aha. I'm on my radio button in the order I specified. Apply, cancel, and then jumping around. Okay. Enter key, good. Escape key, oh. Yes, good. Okay, we fixed it. So, tab order is correct. Our default actions are applied. We've dealt with the issue with the container control. We've got our correct tab order. Okay, let's look at the ribbon and the controls that we added to the ribbon. So in Pro, we use key tips. I hit the Alt tab. Notice that under the tabs, we show those key tips, the so-called alt text. So my button happens to be on that tab called Add-in. I hit the Z key, and then it moves me into that tab. If I had a key tip on that Show Doc pane, I would see that, and then I could use that key combination to execute that particular button. I don't have one. I need to add one. Additionally, I need to add the equivalent of a shortcut key to that button, and in DAML, that's something called an accelerator, okay? So the last thing I want to do is I want to fix the ribbon, and I want to put an accelerator on that button to automatically open that doc pane, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So now, instead of being in the XAML, which is the WPF thing, I'm going to the config.daml, where the content of my ribbon is defined. All right. And I go all the way to the end. I'm scrolling slow so as not to make you dizzy. All right. So key tip. I want a key tip. And then in the key tip, I specify the letter combination that I want to use. It has to be unique within your tab, okay? So in this case, Show Doc pane, I'm going to go with SD, okay? So that is my alt text for that button on the ribbon, okay? I also want a shortcut key. So I want alt text and I want a shortcut key, okay? And so I'm going to add something called an accelerator. Okay, so I add an accelerator section and then I insert an accelerator. It wants the ID of the button that I want to put the shortcut on. That's the ref ID. I'll come back and I'll get that in a second. I don't know what it is. Flags, so that you can think of this as a modifier. So I'm going to use the control modifier, so control key. And then it wants the key. And in this case, I'm going to use the same key. I'm going to use S followed by D. Okay? Let me just go get the ID of the button. And it is this guy right here. Okay, so now I've put that shortcut key on. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the code behind that was generated by the template. By default, that button just shows it so you can see the alt and that accelerator working. I'm just going to make this a toggle to hide and show the doc pane. So all I'm going to do is if my pane is already visible, I'm going to hide it. Otherwise, you know, I'll show it. Okay, just like that. Okay, let's run this, see what we get. All right, well, it compiled, must be good. Okay, so Alt Z. Okay, now I've got my alt text, SD, Alt Z, SD. Okay, that looks good. And then I've got my Control SD shortcut, Control SD, Control SD. Okay, that looks good. So I've got my shortcut on there, I've got my alt text. So I'm kind of done. All right, let's go back to the slides. Okay, so alt text kind of covered that. That's the key tip. Then the accelerators, got an example there in the slides. We saw how to do that. Okay, so this leads us to our final topic. There may well be situations where the out-of-the-box styles are not sufficient for your purposes, and you need to modify them. So Steve's going to show you how to do that. There may even be situations where you have some kind of third-party content on your dock pane or whatever, and you need to style it completely. And in those cases, you're going to have to be responsible for making sure it flips to light, to dark, to high contrast if you want to blend. And Steve's going to show you how to do that too. Okay.
Great. Thanks, Charlie.
Yep.
So as Charlie said, for the most part, if you keep your dialogue simple, you'll get a lot of the styling for free. But of course, there'll be times where you want to do some advanced styling. And here's one example where I have a text box, and we want to instead change the properties maybe so that we have a max width or a max height. And we'll see if we run the app, our text boxes have changed from what Charlie showed, and we've compressed them a little bit, and everything looks pretty good. But I've added this button to quickly toggle us between light and dark themes so we can easily design this dialogue. And we see right away we have a problem that our text boxes went from a background of gray to this background of white. And how did that happen when we only changed our max width here? The problem is that if you specify a style like this, what you're saying is you want to override the default style. And ArcGIS Pro, as Charlie said, has created implicit styles for many of the simple controls that people use. In order to not trump that, we need to use this based on attribute here. Oops, I'm going to blow away this guy. And uncomment here. And this is the key here. So we're going to say, we're going to instead extend the style. So we want to still be based off the implicit style that is automatically be found at runtime, but we want to append on these changes. Now if I build this, rerun. Open our project. Now you see we've gone back to our default styling. And this is Esri's styling beneath the cover. So we have an implicit style for text boxes, and now we just want to tweak those styles a little bit, so we have to, it's essential that we add the based on keyword there. The same is true for these list boxes that I have down here. They're exactly the same, except the one on the left does not use the based on, and the one on the right does. So in this case, we wanted to maybe add a custom border around the list box. But to do it properly, we again have to use the based on so we get the implicit styling. Okay, next I want to show you how you can theme your bitmaps. So when we start dark mode, we load up a different set of bitmap resources that are colored for the theme. And you may want to do this in your doc panes or your dialogues. And let me quickly show you an example here. So you can see in light theme that my bitmap here is a little bit lighter. But when I switch over to dark theme, the colors become a little bit richer and they stand out better in the dark theme. Let me show you how we do that. So the key here is to use resource dictionaries and to load the appropriate resource dictionary at startup. So first, we define our image, and we, instead of specifying the image explicitly here, we're going to send it through a resource. So we're going to say our source is a dynamic resource, and I've called it base map. And then we define this resource in per theme resource dictionaries. So for example, we'll have a resource dictionary for light theme, a resource dictionary for high contrast, and for dark theme. And you'll see here, oh, here's my bitmap resource. And in dark theme, in light theme, it's images basemap 32. But if I go to dark theme, you'll see it's dark images basemap 32. And if we look at our solution, we'll see that we have those as resources in our project. So what happens at runtime, when the doc pane initializes, in our constructor, we added a call to a new function called init resources. And we're able to ask Pro what its current theme is. And if it's dark theme, we can load that specific resource dictionary, dark theme.xaml. And if it's high contrast, we'll load our high contrast resource dictionary. Otherwise, we'll default down to our light theme. How I did it on the fly was I just call init resources whenever that custom button I added is clicked. So you'll see I clear the resources and just reload them. And that way my button is able to switch theme because it's dynamic. Lastly, I want to show our vector button. So as Charlie mentioned, you don't have to use PNGs. You can use vector graphics, which scale perfectly in different settings. So if I'm running 200%, it's going to look just as good as it does at 100% or anywhere in between. And this button is authored very similar to the PNG we just looked at. This button also has a custom style. And like Charlie pointed out, we want to make sure we color it using our resources. So I know Esri has a black resource that's going to be black and white and light theme, but it's going to be white and dark theme. So I'm going to use that. And I'm going to open my button. But let's look more closely at the button style itself. So we have some custom properties. Our foreground here, again, is black. And we're going to re-template. We're going to draw that outer circle, which is an ellipse. And we're going to bind our colors to the foreground color, which is Esri black in this case. But if we look further, we'll see, okay, maybe we want our arrow that we had inside to be custom colors. And so for the demo, we've established Dev Summit blue and Dev Summit light blue. And when we look at our themes, we'll see we have these colors defined again per theme. So Dev Summit blue is blue and light theme. But if we jump to dark resources, Dev Summit blue is yellow. And right, so let me run it and just make sure that's clear. So here's our custom vector button using vector graphics, and it has like a mouse over effect. And those colors come from our custom resource dictionary, which is light theme at the moment. But when we click the button, we switch the application over to dark theme, and we reload our resource dictionary. And black became white, and blue became yellow. That's it. Back to you, Charlie. Oh yeah, sorry. That'll help.
Okay, so key points on that. When you derive from an existing style, use based on. You can kind of think of it as style inheritance, okay? So if you don't put the based on, it implicitly means you want the default, whatever it is, a WPF or whatever is providing. So explicitly say which style you're tweaking. That's really the important thing there. And then in the custom styling that Steve was showing, the key is that when you want to do custom styling, you have to take responsibility for making 3 separate styles if you want to blend light, dark, and high contrast. So what Steve showed was he'd find a color or a color resource, for example, that he called Esri Dev Summit Blue, and then he defined physically different colors for that in separate resource dictionaries. And then he was flipping that resource dictionary by hand in that code so that the correct style would load. That's really the key. We have a sample online that shows custom styling that actually shows that same pattern, but that's the pattern you'll follow. You'd have to make 3 styles in 3 different resource dictionaries, and then you take responsibility for the loading of which one. You know which one to load by looking at this framework application.application theme property, and that tells you, am I in default dark or high contrast? Okay, here's our resources, the style guide, there's that custom styling guide, brushes and colors. And with that, any questions?
All right here.
Yes, sir.
So my company uses software called WebEx to it's kind of screen sharing, allows controlling other machines remotely. Both our support staff use it as well as just internally demoing. A couple weeks ago, we were demoing our internally our admin for ArcGIS Pro, and my boss tried to load one of the dialogues or admin, and WebEx kind of just it was almost blank. Like you could kind of see there was some text boxes and text and radio buttons, but it was very difficult. Like, I guess my question is there anything you can do to prevent that when you're passing the screen through another software company?
So is it just that dialogue, or is all content coming through kind of blurred out on this presenter? I guess I'm not sure of that. Like if you look at, some dialogue and something else, is it always like that, or was it just this one dialogue that he did that came out looking kind of dumbed down?
It was just this one. Some of them were working.
Uh-huh.
So it could just be how that particular example was written.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have like the magic answer. Well, when you're using, these web-based presenters, avoid this or avoid that. I mean, I think that's kind of like sort of an iterative thing. If there was particular text fonts that it was having difficulty rendering or didn't show bitmaps well or whatnot. But I don't have like, particular rules of thumb. Don't really have any experience with that issue. Yep. Yes, you're welcome. Okay.
Yeah, well, we have a few minutes if anyone wants to come up.
Yep,
And,
please.
I think
please
we have
do.
our business cards here if you want to email us with any questions. That's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.